Hello, my name is David Bryan, and this is Curiosity Invited, a podcast inspired by endless curiosity. Tune in for an open-minded conversation about interesting and important things. Hello, and welcome to Curiosity Invited. I'm David Bryan, and today I have the pleasure of speaking with somebody who's been on the podcast before. Name is Sunada Newlin, and she is, among other things, an educator, an anthropologist, and most significantly, she is, and the subject of what we'll speak about today, she is the executive director of the Heart Mountain Wyoming Foundation. And their latest venture is really the subject of what we're speaking about today, is the Mineta-Simpson Institute. The Mineta-Simpson Institute is a way of looking forward and learning from those lessons of that past blemish in American history, and moving it to the future and taking it into the future, and helping a younger generation kind of create a more generous of spirit world, more generous of spirit attitude towards difference, and people who are not, quote, like us, whatever that means, whatever one's us is. Is incredibly enthusiastic about her work and a great asset to the Heart Mountain Interpretive Center, the Heart Mountain Wyoming Foundation, and to helping to create a world of more grace and more insight and more generosity of spirit. So with that, I give you Sunada Newlin. Well, hello, and this is David Bryan again, Curiosity Invited, and I am with Sunada Newlin, and not only did I trip over saying Ara's name, we just spent a half an hour having a really nice conversation that I forgot to hit record on. So here we go again. I am so sorry, but
That's okay. So for anybody listening, if David and I both look really bored for a little bit, it's because this is the second time we're having this conversation today.
Oh, so Ara, you are, among other things, among being an educator, an anthropologist, the soon-to-be, we hope, doctor of anthropology. You are the executive director of the Heart Mountain Wyoming Foundation, and I'll let you talk about what that is. The Heart Mountain Wyoming Foundation. I mean, I know what it is because I live down the way, just a little bit from there. But and I know we've spoken about this on the podcast before. But for those people who didn't see it, or they should go back and listen. And thanks for doing this, by the way, again.
Oh, I'm always thrilled to talk to you, David. So, yeah, the Heart Mountain Wyoming Foundation is an umbrella organization for just a lot of amazing activity that's going on here at the site of one of the effectively concentration camps for Japanese Americans during World War II. Heart Mountain was one of the 10 major camps organized by the War Relocation Authority at the time. And at any given time, from 1942 to 1945, there were about 10,000 people of Japanese ancestry incarcerated here, behind barbed wire in what was effectively a city that popped up in the middle of the plains and disappeared just as soon after the war as it arose. I am a descendant of Heart Mountain incarcerees. I'm mixed race, Japanese American and Irish American. And yeah, so the foundation oversees the protection of the historic site that we have here, which includes a handful of original buildings from the camp that still remain. We also operate the Heart Mountain Interpretive Center, which is a museum that has just been named a Smithsonian affiliate, which we're very excited about. It's a nice
What does that actually
recognition of the
mean?
work.
What does that mean? It's a Smithsonian affiliate.
It means that so the Smithsonian, as we know, in Washington D.C., is really the pinnacle of what museums can be. The quality is extremely high. It's visionary, and there are a there's a community of affiliates around the country that basically get the stamp of approval from the National Smithsonian, saying that what you're doing on your sites around the country is worthy of our name and our logo.
Oh wow! Oh wow!
So
That's
it's a
great.
very big hat tip to what we're doing here. So yeah, we have this Smithsonian affiliate museum now, and also we have just opened the Mineta-Simpson Institute at Heart Mountain, which is a retreat center, a lecture hall, and really a way for us to take the message of Japanese American incarceration during World War II into the realm of broader conversations that affect democracy at large.
And just to clarify and to sort of restate, underline, right? So for those who don't know, during World War II, uh, so the United States was, among other things, fighting with the Japanese, the nation of Japan, and various. Well, I'll say it. You don't have to, but various racist attitudes that saturated some of the government managed to convince others who were in power that they needed to isolate, imprison Japanese Americans. These were American citizens, Japanese Americans, not affiliated with the country of Japan, who happened to be of Japanese heritage, and practically overnight, and some, with days, um, had to take what they could carry and be incarcerated. And I know you've said it. I mean, I learned it from you, right? I mean, a way of putting it, it's, it was behind barbed wire and with gun towers, but the guns were not pointing outward, they were pointing inward. So this was not a campsite. This was a detention center, an incarceration center, a prison, a concentration camp where Japanese Americans, for no reason other than their heritage, were locked up. And
Correct.
and and obviously a blemish on society. And for those people who have not made it to the Heart Mountain Interpretive Center, it really is an extraordinary. It's a small. It's not like you're walking for blocks and blocks like when you go to New York City or go to go someplace in Europe and see these magnificent, huge museums. But it is not huge, but it is indeed magnificent. It is an incredibly moving experience to be there and to see. And so much is done and communicated in such a small space. And so I'm a big fan. And 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 I love the idea, and I know I've said this before, moments ago, in fact, when the record button wasn't pressed, that I know somebody said, the museum looks back at this period in time, and but the intention of the Mineta-Simpson Institute is actually to move that forward into the present and the future, and hopefully move the world towards a more generous of spirit and more understanding and just more graceful and more decent and more willing to engage with human beings in respectful, productive ways. Um, but so the quick story, and I know you just told this to me, and you've probably been saying it a lot, but the name Mineta-Simpson Institute, where did that come from?
This institute, which part of why I'm so excited about it is that it just opened like a month ago. So it's shiny new, and we're just starting to implement what we envision having in there. But it's named after our two mentors and honorary advisors here at Heart Mountain, the late Secretary Norman Mineta and the still kicking Senator Al Simpson. These two figures are known for their leadership in politics with Al being a conservative Republican who rose up to be, a leader of the Senate, and Norm Mineta, who's a liberal Democrat from California who started as a congressman and rose up to eventually be Secretary of Commerce under Clinton, Secretary of Transportation under George W. Bush. These men are known for their careers in politics, but what we know them for here at Heart Mountain is their friendship that started as children during the war years here at camp. Norm and his family were incarcerated here, having been brought here forcibly from San Jose. Al and his brother Pete lived in Cody, Wyoming, just down the road from us. And they came together as Boy Scouts when their two Boy Scout troops courageously, made the step of saying, these are kids should get together and meet each other and see each other as friends and, fellow Boy Scouts instead of possible enemies to be afraid of. And so the troop from Cody came out to the camp here at Heart Mountain. And incidentally, Al was paired up with Norm. And they shared a tent together and they, played games and got into some mischief and hit it off really well, became the best of friends, right away. And then went their separate ways and then rejoined when they became elected officials in Washington. And what's extraordinary about their story, and this is the inspiration that we take in naming our new institute after them, is that they were on opposite sides of the aisle. And it wasn't like they sacrificed some of who they were or their firmly held beliefs about policy in order to be friends with the other. Rather, they used that strength of their convictions to, in a way, come together across differences in a more powerful way, saying that, yes, we disagree on these things, but our country is more important. Our, Constitution is more important, and the people of America need some legislation passed. And they were known for compromising and bringing their colleagues from opposite sides of the aisle together to formulate, legislation over the years.
Certainly a lesson that's universally been adopted everywhere, right? Right. We don't need
Sure,
that
it's actually
anymore. Yeah.
because of them, we've learned our lesson and we don't need their help anymore, right?
It works just splendidly now. Right. So these two guys, friends for life, and came together. So that inspires the name. And so you made mention of what are the sorts of things that you hope. Well, take that back. That the Mineta-Simpson Institute will be doing as it sort of comes online. It is open, but what's going on there, or what will be going on there?
Well, there are two aspects of it. One that is more open than the other right now. We have just installed a permanent exhibit that is beautiful, and it celebrates the life and friendship of Norm and Al. So if you come here to our museum, like the museum is here, and there's a hallway, and then the Mineta-Simpson Institute is over here, and that's the lecture hall where I'll talk about the gatherings that we want to be having there. But connecting the museum and the institute is this hallway, and in that hallway is where this Norm and Al exhibit is, as we lovingly call it. And there's been a lot of celebration of Norm on his own, and a lot of celebration of Al on his own at museums and archives everywhere. But this exhibit places the two of them together and it tracks them through their career. And it's such an incredible testament to what they were able to achieve and the model that they still present. So people can come here, and even if you've never heard of Norm Mineta and Al Simpson, you can learn it by experiencing this exhibit. And then symbolically also, the museum is, as you mentioned, anchored in Japanese American incarceration history. What we see happening is people will go through this Norm and Al exhibit, and through the process, kind of, we hope that their senses will be softened a little bit, especially in these hyper partisan times, I feel like we're really like gripping onto what we hold dear. And, even just doing that feels like a grip to me, but it also looks like fists, right? We
Right.
tend to be so combative right now. And what we want to happen is that people will walk through that exhibit and, you know, the fists relax a little bit and we become more open to hearing things from people who we may not understand very well or who we may not agree with or who we look different from. And that primes people to go into this retreat center or lecture hall, which is the Mineta-Simpson Institute. And in that space, we want to be inviting groups of leaders from all over the country, including all over the world, really, to come to this intimate space and specifically reflect on the problems that our societies are really struggling with right now. Problems of getting along across differences, the rule of law, um, struggles over racism and themes of immigration and themes of national security and how we navigate those really difficult problems in our society in a way that is still civil and respectful and not even just respectful, but that hopefully generates the kind of true love that Norm and Al held for each other despite having very different policy opinions.
And the it's hard in the abstract. So there's a lecture hall, and 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 are there more intimate spaces, or is it a large lecture? I mean, I have not, I don't know if it's even open. Is it open yet?
It is.
Good.
We
Let,
haven't figured
we'll
out
walk
quite
through
how
that.
to advertise it yet,
Yeah.
but you'll have to come out and see it, and I can
Oh,
send you pictures
absolutely.
actually that we can
Yeah.
put on screen.
Great.
It's an intimate space. I think we can seat about 200 people in there, auditorium style, and there's a stage, but it's not so huge that it feels impersonal. Actually, it's
Mm-hmm.
a really great place to have these like workshops and small conversations.
Mm-hmm.
And we also have a digital production studio where we will be able to record podcasts, record oral histories. We'll be able to record the panel discussions that we envision happening on the stage and live stream them. So there's an element of outreach and
Mm-hmm.
broadcasting outward, as well as bringing people to our site so that they can experience the power of place that we have here and roll up sleeves and get to work on these big questions that are so difficult.
And is there area on the campus site where people could be staying? I mean, if some people are adventurous, could they camp there? Or no, it's not set up like that.
Unfortunately,
It's a
not.
work. It's a workspace, and then and
And
then
then we'll
there's the
send
hall.
people to the towns of Cody and Powell to, yeah, the lodging would be in Cody and Powell.
Right.
One of the really cool things about our new space, though, is that we also have an industrial kitchen, a commercial kitchen, which, for one thing, helps us serve the community. We've heard that in our Park County here, there just aren't very many industrial kitchens if people want to have a catered event or something. So that's something that will now be available to the local communities. But it also now allows us to have catered events at our site. Um, so the food can be prepared right there. And even beyond
Oh.
that, it allows us to engage people in active learning. So we can have events, for example, the story of agriculture at Heart Mountain is one of our main stories that we tell here, because the Japanese American incarcerees transformed this landscape from high desert plains to being lush farmland, where they grew an astonishing array of produce. And so we can use our new space to tell the story of agriculture at Heart Mountain, and then people can eat the types of food that would have been prepared, or that people would have liked to eat had they been able to prepare it. We can also have, cooking demonstrations and cooking classes so that people can have more of an embodied learning experience rather than just going through an exhibit and learning things with their head. It's like learning things with your whole body.
I read something somewhere about the is it the former root center? Is it the root center that was actually there, or is it a model of one? And will it be functional and so that so stuff that gets grown will be stored in the root cellar and prepared in the meals?
Let me tell you about the root cellar. Um, this is one of our, major projects right now. One of the few remaining structures from the original camp is a giant root cellar that was built and designed entirely by Japanese American labor. And it's hard to envision, you know, a root cellar being an exciting thing. But this thing, I kid you not, is the size of a football field. It's about 300, it's over 300 feet long. Um, and over the
Wow.
course of the years, the war years, I always get my numbers wrong, but I think the second year they stored like 4,000 pounds of produce, something like that, uh, in the root cellar. So it fed the population here, and it still remains. It's in a state of active collapse, but the cellar itself was gifted back to the foundation around 2016. The homesteader family who owned it recognized that this was of historic importance, and so we, as the Heart Mountain Wyoming Foundation, are working on restoring this cellar to a point that makes it safe to go in, for one thing. Also, we are working on getting it up to code so that it's ADA accessible. Um, it meets all the modern building codes, but our vision is that people will be able to go inside the root cellar and experience that.
Is it right there on the site? I mean, is
Yep,
it on the campus?
it's on our campus. You can't really,
Yeah,
can walk there from our museum, but it's like a
yeah.
2-minute drive. And we anticipate being able to open that for public access, hopefully starting sometime in summer 2025, so about a
Yeah.
year from now.
Wow. Wow.
We won't be storing our own produce there, but we will be able to, serve food in
Sure.
our um, in our new retreat center that helps us talk about the experience and the
Right.
struggles related to food at camp.
Right. 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 That's great. Okay. So, I mean, this may be something we want to cut out, but I'm going to ask a nerdy question because I'm a nerd. But
So am
uh,
I.
so where's this funding come from? First of all, who owns the land? Is it owned by the foundation?
Yes, the Heart Mountain Wyoming Foundation owns the land that the museum is on. We own the root cellar.
Right.
Um, we are a private nonprofit, so
Right.
we are. Some of the other camps around the country are national park sites, but we are not. We are our own foundation. We have a private board, um, and that, we've just been really fortunate to be able to make a go of it on our own as a private foundation instead of a government organization, which to us feels important because it gives us the flexibility to tell our story in our own
Yes.
voices
Yes.
from the first person. Our museum is written in the first person. So instead of saying they were rounded up, uh, here's where, they ate. We were rounded up, and here's where we went to school, and here's where we ate. This is what life was like for us, and it's a tangible difference.
Totally.
And that's one of the many ways that makes
Yeah.
us like thrilled to be a private organization.
Yeah.
But we have benefited from a lot of federal grants and private donations. So we have to be scrappy at all
Yeah.
times, trying to make sure that we can sustain our operations,
And
especially as we
and
grow.
is there any idea that some of the use of the institute will, well, maybe it'll be for free, but maybe not, right? I mean, people will come and rent this facility for however long they need to use it, and that will help support the foundation, I take it, right, and the whole site.
Exactly. We don't yet have the luxury of just being able to offer a purely public
Yeah,
service. So,
sure.
yeah, we're getting better at attaching fees to, rental facility use and admission and things like that. Um, and what I've learned over the years is that that's not actually, um, a greedy thing, or um,
Not at all.
money tends to be framed as a bad thing, but actually we see it as a way for people who care about the work that we're doing to be able to be a part of it. Um, by coming here, but also by helping us sustain our operations with funding. That makes it really a community-wide and nationwide project that we're working on, and it's a way for people to be a part of what we're doing.
And maybe it's too soon to even have an answer for this question, but has there been a response from the local communities, the local community? Are people is everybody excited about this? I mean, I'm like, I'm super excited about it. I just think it's, I mean, I love the museum. I think the museum is really spectacular, and the idea that it's, that it's still a relatively unknown period, maybe less and less so, but um, so I think this institute is it's a wonderful idea, and I hope it's bustling with all sorts of activity. But I'm wondering about the local community. I mean, I want them to be like, so, wow, we've got this, and now there's this new resource that we can access. That's
Yes,
spectacular.
and so far we have enjoyed extraordinary support from the local community. In fact, this museum wouldn't even be here without the initial efforts of local homesteading families who
Mhm.
recognized that something important happened here and it needed to be preserved. Our foundation has always been a partnership between the local community and the community of former incarcerees. And we've been very mindful over the years and worked really hard to make sure that this is a place that can be celebrated by all. And
Mhm.
again, that's in this spirit of Mineta and Simpson that this is very much an American story, right? This isn't a place where, you know, you really should only come here if you are Japanese American.
Yeah,
In
right.
fact, all of us have a responsibility to carry this work forward. Um, and yeah, I think with our new institute space and also our expanded collections space, we have an archive and we have artifacts from camp, and we have new space to fill up with new artifacts. And as we get to working more in the local community, people come in all the time who have artifacts from camp. After the war
Oh, wow.
ended, the barracks were sold off for $1 a piece to returning veterans and homesteaders. And to this day, a lot of those barracks are still, scattered all over the landscape, and
Yes,
people are living in them. They've been converted into homes
yes,
and sheds.
exactly. I've been in places where, I kind of looked quizzically and people said, yeah, this came from the camp. And I was like, oh, wow. You're living in, or it's a shed from
Yep.
what were the barracks, which is amazing. And all sprinkled around the area.
Yeah, and increasingly, people are coming to us, and as we make local folks feel welcome here, we're encouraging them like, hey, do you have stories that were passed
Yeah.
down to you from camp? Or do you have memories of when you were a child?
Mm.
Do you have artifacts? And the response has been really heartwarming, and locals want to be a part of what we're doing, I think. And we, again, in the Mineta-Simpson spirit, we are so committed to not being divisive. We are being welcoming
Right.
to anybody who wants to be a part of this larger project of,
Yeah.
civil discourse
Yeah.
and civic engagement.
And I mean, I have some fantasy, probably my old educator hat, right? But that that the schools would be beating down the doors of the museum, and is that something that sort of on the horizon of what you're offering, like bringing school groups and so they can see the museum and and participate in some of the conversations that happen in the institute.
Oh, it's not even on the horizon. We already have school groups locally, but also from all over the state and from Montana
Yeah, fabulous.
coming and having field trips here. And we have an education manager who, has crafted, these guided tours for school kids. And we're working on telling the story that is age appropriate, like
Sure.
what sorts of ways can we
Right.
engage third graders as opposed to seniors in high school, as opposed to college students. Um, we are also starting to wade into virtual tours. So if you have a classroom or an audience in Milwaukee, Wisconsin or something, they can come and have like a field trip to our
Right.
museum with our
Right.
virtual tours.
Right. That's great. That's great. And that's already happened, right? I mean, you've got
Yep.
kids who come. That's fabulous. Terrific. And the kids
And
are,
we've also like gotten my enthusiasm for our local and state support is just through the roof because we work closely with like Wyoming Humanities and other organizations around the state who want to be a part of what we're doing. So some of this work like has been funded by, grants, I think from the Wyoming Community Foundation and Wyoming Cultural Trust Fund, Wyoming Humanities, that help us get students here, that help us convey this story to audiences throughout Wyoming and throughout the country.
well, I want this, I want the answer to this question to be no, but has there been any sort of, have, have you bumped into any sort of pushback? Like, why is it here and why is it growing? It shouldn't be, that's just it's why are you unearthing some past that, et cetera, et cetera. Is there any of that?
Well, there's a lot of that, but
Oh,
um,
that's not a
it
no.
comes from, that's not a no, but it hasn't been to the level that it would disrupt what we're doing. I think that it's an uncomfortable past. And I'm an anthropologist, and the thing that makes me thrive and the thing that I think makes life interesting is going out of my comfort zone and being a little bit, you know, challenged and confronted in learner friendly ways, learner centered ways.
Yeah,
That's my lifeblood. I like going
yeah,
out
yeah.
outside of my comfort zone. But for a lot of people, that's a very uncomfortable thing. And so defenses, tend to be high. And because this history hasn't been taught very well in schools really until the past decade or so, um, there are misunderstandings. And so a lot of people come in with a little bit of a chip on their shoulder or defensiveness,
Yeah, yeah.
but if they are here, that's the first step. And then they find that, like, no, we really are about education here, and we are not um, easily pigeonholed as, one thing or another in
Hmm.
terms of our messaging. And
Hmm.
so if people give us the chance to have some time with them, we find that people leave feeling full hearted and hopefully a little bit more open than when they came in.
And if folks want to find out, is it on the website or like what's going on there or schedule of things that some obviously will be group specific that are coming to use the facility, but others might be open to the public, et cetera. Is there an easy way for people to find that out?
At this point, the easiest way is probably through our social media channels. We're on all the major ones. Our website is heartmountain.org. So events will be
I'll make
posted
sure
there
that's
as well.
for sure.
And I'll tell you about another cool development that we have here that comes at our programming from a little bit different angle in a way that I'm really excited about moving toward, which is we have just welcomed to our site a new staff member from Japan who will be with us for 2 years as part of a Japanese government program called the Japan Outreach Initiative. It's funded by the Japan Foundation, And we were selected as one of just a handful of sites for this year's cohort. And the aim of the JOY program, JOI, Joy, is to, you know, build goodwill and cross-cultural sharing between Japan and the United States at the grassroots level. So we now have a JOY coordinator. Her name is Haruka. She's been here just about a month. And what she will be doing is offering Japanese cultural programming here at the Mineta-Simpson Institute that ties together this like long arc of Japanese culture from, you know, its roots like pre-war and early Japan, and then focusing on the camp experience, because while this was a population of immigrants and American-born children, they still had some Japanese cultural activities while at camp. And we have photos and we have videos and we have stories about Japanese cultural activities that happened here. And so we will be doing programming on that, giving some history, talking about these activities at camp, and then fast forwarding to the present and what do these cultural activities mean in Japan today, and how can it be a fun way for America and Japan to get to know each other a little bit better. And we're doing it with one important caveat, which is part of the problem in the first place that led to the camps was that the American public and the American government was unwilling to see a difference between the immigrant population here in the United States and the Japanese government. The rationale was that like they're all the same and we can't tell them apart. And so if they're here, they obviously must be Japanese and therefore they're a threat. And we still struggle against that today. Like I'm Japanese American, but I don't speak Japanese. And so we're not conflating Japan with the Japanese American experience. What we are doing is carving out a way for us as Japanese Americans to celebrate our Japanese heritage and reclaim what was taken away from us. I mean, at the time, you know, my grandparents and their families, they were punished for having anything to do with Japan. And there was a lot of cultural loss that went along with that. You know, if you are seen to have any kind of nostalgia for Japan, then you will literally be put in a prison camp and the FBI will come and hunt you down. We are taking that back now with this Japanese cultural programming. Not to say that these Japan and the U.S., you know, or Japan and the immigrant experience were the same, but rather that we don't have to be afraid of one another.
Do you know if there were restrictions at the camps when they were active against activities, cultural events that would be seen as primarily Japanese, right? I mean, was there? So I mean, look, barbed wire and guns are enough, right? But I'm wondering if there was also an active, you know, like with the Native American population in various places, there was an active trying to stamp it out, right? And
Right.
was there a similar sort of thing or no?
It's a really good question, and I know there must have been a lot of that at first. As the war years went on, things loosened up, and we know that people did these activities, so they weren't like totally cracked down on. But especially at the beginning of the war, there was a lot of fear, and people, you know, weren't allowed to have cameras, and they, you know, had their things taken away from them. But somehow during the camp years, they were able to continue some of the traditions. And for example, one of the programs that our Joy coordinator Haruka is developing is about kimonos. So this is the traditional dress that people in Japan wear. And when people were incarcerated here, they could only bring what they could carry. So like one suitcase, two suitcases at the most. And if you could imagine trying to decide, all right, I have just a couple weeks to pack up the most important things in my life. I can only take what I can carry. Some people brought their kimonos with them, which would feel like a whole suitcase. Some people decided to bring those with them, and it begs the question, why? Like, doesn't that seem frivolous? Shouldn't you bring something that's more functional? But um, there's something about a kimono that's like a photo album, a family photo album or something.
Hmm.
These pieces of clothing might have been passed down from generations, and losing it, leaving it behind, um, adds a whole nother layer of trauma to,
Mm-hmm.
being severed from
Right.
uh, your traditions. And so some people brought them with them.
Yeah.
And we
Interesting.
can then engage with questions of like, well, if you didn't bring your kimono with you, what did that mean to have to leave it behind? How difficult was that? So we can engage in those kinds of questions, yeah, as a form of healing, really.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then we can pull it to the present and be like, well, what sorts of events do people wear kimonos for today? And what meaning do they have for Japanese people today?
Mm-hmm. And people who are not Japanese, what are their parallel? Are there
Right,
parallel things that mean so much culturally that the rest of us don't have any idea about? Right.
right.
Cool. Well, it's so exciting, and your enthusiasm. I mean, they're lucky to have you, and you're lucky to have them. So it seems like a match made in heaven. And what else? What else should we say before before we hang up for the first time rather than the second time?
Well, um, I
Not a
think
trick
it's
question.
worth I think it's worth reflecting on some of the words that Al Simpson and Norm Mineta themselves would often say, and that they sort of used as guiding lights throughout their life. Al Simpson and his brother Pete Simpson, both of them still live in Cody, and they often will quote their mother as having told them throughout their lives that hatred corrodes the container it's carried in.
Hmm.
And if we just go a little bit, deeper into that idea, it's such a simple idea that is so powerful and it holds so much truth. Because if you think about maybe the container is the body. So if you think of hatred corroding the container it's carried in, if I have hatred like in my heart and in my body, it destroys my body. It destroys me to be carrying around all of this anger. And it wears down on us. And we actually know this from neuroscience and
It's
things
really
like
kind
that.
of great, right? I mean, it's like now we have the science to say that's actually accurate.
That's true. Like the stress that comes from like holding all of this hatred and anger inside of us, it's not healthy.
No,
It doesn't lend toward
no.
psychological health or,
Or
physical health at
organic
all.
tissue health, right? Yes.
Yeah, like it's not good
Yeah.
for us. You could also think of the container as being our nation or our
Hmm.
community. If there is hatred that is being seeded uh, in our social networks and in our politics, then that ultimately has a destructive effect on our
Indeed.
community or on our nation.
Indeed.
And it's such a simple phrase, but that I feel is what a lot of like regular folks in America right now are feeling. Like we hear on the news, there's so much animosity, tensions are really high. Um, and if we step back, we can see that this is tearing our country apart and it doesn't feel good. And I think a lot of us, regardless of our political beliefs, find it very soothing and welcoming to think of a space where we can let that hatred go for a minute. Like, let's just see each other as humans. Um,
Hmm.
and that's something that Al and his brother Pete say all the time. Norm would always say, just do the right thing, which I can problematize a little bit as an anthropologist because what is right is a very contested
Sure.
notion. Like, we don't agree on what is right. But what Norm was getting at with um, encouraging people to do the right thing is really this idea of putting country before politics, putting the love we might have for each other as family or as friends ahead of the things that might divide us. And we act in ways that we can be proud of. Um,
It may not be easy to identify the right things, but it is frequently the case that we know the wrong thing.
right.
Right? We know the wrong thing to be doing, and yeah, less of that.
And it's hard to do, what we are asking ourselves to do here and what we are inviting other people to engage in when they come here is a process of, like, again, stepping out of our comfort zones, stepping out of our social political bubbles, and taking the high road instead of resorting to, like,
Yeah,
our defensiveness.
yeah,
And it's much harder to take the high road and to, be a little bit humble. And it's often harder to just sit and listen instead of to orate
you bet.
and deliver. So we're asking ourselves and others to do the hard work instead of just taking the easy route. And ultimately, that is far more rewarding than just staying in our own lane all the time. This is how we grow. If we were never putting ourselves in positions that were uncomfortable, then we would never grow, right? How boring would life be if I only talked to people who agree with me?
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
that's no fun.
Whenever you're in a room where everybody's nodding their head at the same time, you should get a little bit nervous. Really,
Yeah.
everybody agrees. Everybody. So, well, all right. What a pleasure, what a treat, and I'm genuinely and so sincere about this. Your enthusiasm is a wonderful piece of what the Heart Mountain Wyoming Foundation represents. So thank you, and thank you for being willing to give up even more time than you would have had I not forgotten to hit the record button. So.